In this video, we are going to talk about VeChain, some of its recent price action, the important support and resistance areas, and where we can expect the price of VeChain to go in the next few days and weeks. So we'll start by looking at the weekly chart, and what we can see right here is that VeChain is continuing to dump. VeChain has basically been dumping without any real sign of recovery since late 2024, since we've had this mini alt season in late 2024. We've seen VeChain continuously dump. More recently, since about February to May, we've seen the dump by VeChain slowing down, and VeChain has been consolidating, but in the last few weeks, since we've seen Bitcoin get a pretty significant dump as well, from about 82k to less than 70k at the moment, VeChain has been following it and continuing to dump as well. And really, since this mini alt season back in late 2024, we've seen VeChain just continuously dump no matter what Bitcoin and the rest of the crypto market does, other than a couple of periods right here, a couple of rallies where VeChain has gotten some pretty significant rallies, but it only lasted a few weeks. VeChain really has only been dumping even when Bitcoin was hitting all-time highs back in late 2025 and the entire crypto market was doing very well. VeChain just continued to dump further and further, and since we are in a bear market right now and Bitcoin has been dumping very aggressively from its all-time high, VeChain has just been dumping even more. And as I said, in the last few months, it has been consolidating despite Bitcoin actually getting a very significant relief rally. Bitcoin went all the way down to about 60k and then got a relief rally to over 80k. And despite this very significant rally by Bitcoin and most of the crypto market, VeChain has actually only been consolidating and not getting any significant rally at all. And in the last few weeks, it has been continuing to dump. Also guys, make sure to subscribe if you are enjoying this content and you want more videos about VeChain as well as other altcoins. It helps the channel a lot and I will appreciate it very much. If we look even further back on this chart, we can see that VeChain is below any support area from the recent years. The most recent support area we have here is from 2020 on this chart. So from about 6 years ago is the last time VeChain has visited these areas. We can see that VeChain is at the bottom of this support area right now. This is a support area, but it's not very strong. And in my opinion, the one below it, right here around the all-time low for VeChain, is far stronger. And the chances of VeChain getting a rally will be a lot stronger from there. VeChain also recently went down below this support area from 2018. So really, it is just continuing to dump and lose more and more support areas, and it is not looking very promising for VeChain in the long term. VeChain is just one of those coins that did absolutely insanely back in 2021 in the altcoin season in the previous cycle, but since then in the bear market following it in 2022, it just completely died. VeChain went down about 98% from its all-time high to where it is at right now, and really I don't see any sign of it starting a recovery, and I think that it will most likely never get a new all-time high, or at the very least it will not happen in a very long time, multiple years at the very least. So in the long term on the weekly chart, I really can't say that I am seeing any positive sign whatsoever. It seems very likely that unless VeChain gets a significant rally anytime soon, then VeChain will probably just continue dumping further and further all the way down to its all-time lows at around 0.003 as I showed you before. And now let's go ahead and look at a shorter time frame on the 4-hour chart. So here on the 4-hour chart, really there are no support areas either. Going all the way back to late 2025, VeChain is just continuing to drop and get newer and lower lows. It created another lower low right here just a few hours ago. As I mentioned before, VeChain has been consolidating, but then in the last couple of weeks, it has just been continuing to dump and dump, and there is no sign of recovery whatsoever. The first potential sign of recovery would be if VeChain crosses this recent high at around 0.0063. If that does happen, this could be the very first sign of a turn reversal, but right now we are nowhere near that, and really I can't say too much about VeChain at the moment. It is just in a very clear downtrend, no support areas in sight, looking absolutely horrible for VeChain on the 4-hour chart as well. And now let's go ahead and look at the Bitcoin chart. What we can see right here is pretty similar to what we've seen with VeChain, but actually even a more aggressive dump. We've seen Bitcoin get a very significant and aggressive dump from about 82k all the way down to 67k in just a couple of weeks. But now Bitcoin is approaching this area where it has gotten support from in the past, and Bitcoin is also just very oversold at the moment. If we look at the RSI of Bitcoin, we can see that it is currently at about 15, which is incredibly oversold. Back when Bitcoin was at the lowest part of this bear market at about 60k, which from there it got the very significant rally to over 80k, the RSI was only a tiny bit lower than where it is at right now. So Bitcoin is definitely very oversold, and I would expect a bounce by Bitcoin, at least in the short term, sometime pretty soon. And if that does happen, then it could definitely lead to VeChain at the very least slowing down with its dump, and even quite likely getting a bit of a relief rally. But again, this is in the short term, and as I showed you before, on both the 4-hour and the weekly chart, I'm not too bullish about VeChain at all, and the structure is actually looking very bad. And even if Bitcoin does get a significant bounce in the short term, it absolutely does not guarantee a bounce by VeChain. As I showed you before on the chart, even when Bitcoin was creating new all-time highs back in late 2025, VeChain was continuing to dump and performing very poorly. And during this relief rally recently, VeChain was just consolidating at best. So really, I'm not very optimistic about VeChain. No matter what happens with Bitcoin, at the very best, it can get some slight relief rally. But really, in both the short and long term for VeChain, I think that it's pretty likely that it will just continue to dump. Of course, this isn't financial advice whatsoever, but that's what I personally think about VeChain at the moment. And in general, as you know, if you've seen some of my recent videos, I'm not too optimistic about altcoins as a whole, at least for the next few months, since I think that we are still in a bear market. Despite us seeing Bitcoin get a significant relief rally recently, I think that it is a counter trend rally, and that we will continue to see Bitcoin dumping further, probably heading all the way down to about 60k, which is the February low, and very possibly even heading down below it. So if that does happen, which I think is quite likely, then we will most likely see altcoins doing absolutely terribly. Historically, for us to see an altcoin season and a prolonged period of altcoins significantly outperforming Bitcoin and Ethereum, we first need to see Bitcoin and Ethereum approaching new all-time highs, which right now is very far from being the reality in the market. Bitcoin is at about 50% down from its all-time high, Ethereum even more than that. So the chances of an altcoin season seem very low. And also historically, if we look at this chart of the total 3 minus USDT against Bitcoin, which is basically the ratio of the entire altcoin market compared to Bitcoin, and it shows how well altcoins are performing compared to Bitcoin, we can see that historically in the cycles of 2017 and 2021, what led to the altcoin season is first this chart heading all the way down to this crucial support area at around 0.26. Both times when it happened were the only times we've seen very significant major altcoin seasons. As you can see, these rallies right here in 2017 and the one in 2021. Of course, there can be some rallies that are smaller, like we've seen this one in 2024. We had this small rally in recent weeks, but really for us to get a significant major altcoin season like the one that we've seen in January 2021 and in December of 2017, we first need to see the chart go all the way down to 0.25 or around that area. And of course, for us to see Bitcoin getting into new all-time highs, and that's been in a bull market. Right now, with us being in a bear market, Bitcoin being very far off its all-time highs, and this chart being at 0.4, which is very far above the support area, I'm very pessimistic about the chances of an altcoin season anytime soon. I think that we will most likely not see it in 2026, probably not even much further than that. And I'm expecting most of 2026 to be a bear market year. I think that for us to see an altcoin season, it will probably take, at the very least, very deep into 2027, could possibly even take longer than that. So obviously, this is not financial advice whatsoever, but I would personally avoid being heavy into altcoins for now, and at least for the rest of 2026. And as I showed you before on the chart with VeChain specifically, it is looking absolutely horrible in terms of structure. So I would also avoid being into VeChain at the moment. I would only choose a few altcoins that have a very good structure and be very selective with them, and mostly stick with Bitcoin. Again, not financial advice, but that's what I personally think. And now let's go ahead and look at the page of VeChain on CoinMarketCap. What we can see right here is that the community sentiment, according to about 140,000 votes, is 82% bullish. This doesn't mean as much as you might think. These polls are very bullish on basically all coins. Most of the community are just blindly bullish and just vote that they are bullish on almost everything. 82% bullish is not a figure that is unusual for these polls. And in my opinion, I would strongly disagree with this. I'm very bearish about VeChain in both the short term and long term, especially the long term. In the short term, there is a bit more chance of it getting a rally, as I told you before, if Bitcoin does get a rally in the short term. But even then, I'm quite skeptical. And in the long term, I'm definitely bearish. So I would definitely disagree with this community sentiment. And looking at the fear and greed index for the entire crypto market, we are now at 26. The fear and greed is continuing to go down further and further into fear. It is now firmly into fear, even pretty close to extreme fear, which is below 20. This is, of course, since we've seen Bitcoin get a violent dump from about 82k all the way down to 67k. We've seen the fear and greed go from about 62 all the way down to 26. So this is a very strong drop in both Bitcoin's price and the fear and greed index. This is very typical for a bear market. In bear markets, we see relief rallies being pretty slow and dumps being very aggressive, since the overall trend is downwards, of course, in a bear market. I still think that there is definitely more room for Bitcoin to go down, especially in the long term. As I said, there is definitely possibility for Bitcoin to get a bit of a bounce in the short term with it being so oversold, but in the long term, I think that Bitcoin will continue to go down further, probably all the way down to 60k, the February low, and potentially even lower than that. And once that happens, the fear and greed index will likely get into extreme fear and below 20, and we could stay there for a while as well. So I encourage you to not get too scared once Bitcoin does get that dump and we are in extreme fear. Just remember, this is what happens in bear markets, and it is just what it is with the crypto market and with Bitcoin being such a volatile asset. And now let's look at the altcoin season index. We are currently at 49, which means Bitcoin and the top 100 altcoins have actually been doing very similarly. Altcoins have actually been outperforming Bitcoin in the last few weeks, but I think that this is only temporary and will not be sustainable for long. With the bear market continuing, I am still expecting most altcoins to significantly underperform Bitcoin in the long term. As I showed you on the charts before, an altcoin season is still very unlikely, in my opinion, to happen anytime soon, and I would expect this to go down towards Bitcoin season, probably be even below 25 and very firmly into Bitcoin season as we advance into 2026. So yeah guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it and you want more updates about VeChain as well as other altcoins, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.